Hello and welcome to another episode of India and Global Left. If you're new to the show, please hit the subscribe button. Also consider becoming a YouTube member, a Patreon, or donate a small amount given in the link in the description box. Today we are joined by Scott Ritter, a former US Marine Corps intelligence officer, United Nations weapons inspector, author, and analyst of geopolitics. Scott, welcome back to India and Global Left.
Thanks for having me.
I wanted to start out with a big picture question on US foreign policy. If you could tell us what's your assessment of the overall US foreign policy at this moment?
That's a big question. There's been some interesting developments in terms of public statements. Of course, we saw the national security strategy of the United States that was published in November, and it represented a significant deviation from past practice, more of a focus on Fortress America, fortifying America's posture in the Western Hemisphere, de-emphasizing Europe, redefining engagement against China in the Pacific, and again, sort of a de-emphasis of our engagement in the Middle East, West Asia, even South Asia. But then we see Marco Rubio make certain statements recently in connection to his recent visit to Europe that suggests that it's not that the United States is disengaging with the global South. We're recommitting to a posture that appears to be more neo-colonial in nature, as opposed to being respectful of the sovereign reality of the global South, of nations that are emerging from the shadows of the Cold War to assert themselves more effectively in a more sovereign fashion. We're actually seeking to redefine our relationship with Europe in a manner that allows us to exploit Europe's colonial past to project our influence or reproject our influence. And so I'd say that it's a foreign policy that's in transition, but it's not transitioning in a good way. It's basically taking the concept of American hegemony and restructuring how we impose our will on the world. Gone is the rules-based international order methodology, and now we have, I think, a more blunt, in-your-face, American power. We speak of America great again. I think people who bought into that notion said, well, that's okay, because that just means America's turning inward. No, making America great again apparently is an outward projection of American dominance. And I think that's the direction we're going with the foreign policy of the United States.
And what do you think is the reason for this shift from, let's say, for the lack of a better word, more subtle hegemonic imperial strategy that evolved after Second World War to what you said as a more blunt way of domination? Is it internal crisis within the United States that includes rising cost of living for young people, including rent, etc.? Or is it challenges from outside, China, Russia, and the rise of other powers that have been challenging now the US empire?
I de-emphasize the domestic factor as an impetus for foreign policy for the following reason. The millennial generation, which should be dominant politically in the United States, given the demographics, is passive. They are disengaged, especially when it comes to foreign policy, and they're easily dealt with through economic incentives or distractions. So I think that from a domestic standpoint, this is a manageable issue and isn't the one driving the ship. What's really happening is the need of the United States to look, again, we just have to be brutally honest here. We don't exist as an equal power. I hope the world understands that. We exist as a dominant power. The way we operate with the world is we need to, in order to maintain our standard of living at home, we have to access the world's resources at prices that are to our advantage and not to your advantage. Um, we do that, we did that through the rules based international order, the domination of, the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, other economic structures that defined, how the globe coexisted. But now we see the world transitioning into something new, and so the United States needs to redefine, how it how it will assert its dominance. As I said, the rules-based international order is no longer an effective mechanism for that. We're seeing a pushback. For instance, one of the mainstays of the rules-based international order is the G7. The United States sought to, you know, exploit the success of the perceived success of the G7 by creating the G20, which would suck the global south into an umbrella dominated by the G7. Instead, what we get is the rise of BRICS and an alternative economic forum, alternative economic reality, that not only diminishes the effectiveness of the G20, but exposes the frailty of the G7. The United States can't be held hostage to these legacy frameworks. So we're jettisoning ourselves from these, and we're redefining our posture, and we're going it alone. I mean, gone is the pretense that we need anybody. Gone is the pretense. We don't need anybody. We never did. We always used that as an excuse to create alliances of convenience, but they were really alliances of exploitation. Today, at least, I mean, the one thing we can say about American foreign policy today is it's probably the most honest foreign policy that the United States has ever waged, because there are no pretenses here. We're just saying straight to your face, we are the biggest dog in the block, and if you want to take us on, we'll bite you, chew you up, spit you out. And that's the world we live in. Now, whether or not this dog can actually follow through, this dog might have arthritis, might have some loose teeth, and bad eyesight because it's an old dog. But the point is, we are redefining our position in a changing world, and we're not going to do it in a way that allows people to be our equals. We won't accept equality. I mean, that's we will only tolerate American dominance. That's it.
And this doctrine of not accepting others as equals, or one could even imagine rolling back of the US empire, this is not happening. Is it because of the ideological positions of the people in power, or do you think it is more institutional, meaning thereby the military industrial complex, the CIA and the intelligence frameworks, etc., etc.? Is it because of that empire doesn't roll back, or is it particularly those in power and their ideological position?
I think it's more systemic than that. I think it's wrong to blame just those in power, or even to blame the establishment. Of course, that's all true. They aren't going to yield power. The American people are to blame ultimately. The American people are to blame. We demand this policy. We don't want to be the equals of anybody. We are raised to believe that we are a breed apart, that we are the exceptional people. There are some people, I like to count myself among them, that understand the lunacy of such a projection. But the reality is, on the average street of an American city or an American town, the American people, you cannot run for office today and win a national election where you speak about America being the equal of anybody in the world. That's just that's the death of you politically. We are Americans. We are the best. We're not. We are the brightest. We're not. We are the strongest. We're not. We are the smartest. We're not. But we believe we are. And not only is not just that we believe we are, we believe that we are destined to be. that this is the proper role of America and Americans today. And again, this is where I blame the millennials, because their passivity in engaging on this issue has allowed the generations who should be releasing control, releasing their hold on power, to retain their hold. I mean, we're talking about legacy mindsets. We're talking about boomer mindsets. Um, and, that's normal. It's very hard to get an old dog to learn new tricks, but what the problem is, unless the new dog is ready to jump in and take over the stage, the old dogs are going to sit there and perform the tricks. And right now, the boomers, my generation, and Generation X that came after me, we're not giving up the hold on power, and the millennials aren't demanding release. So, our policy will continue in a changing world where any rational human being would recognize the absolute necessity of the United States to learn to peacefully coexist with the rest of the world as an equal partner in the global community. That's the rational look. The boomers refuse to yield, and we continue to demand that we assert our hegemony, our authority, our dominance on the world today. This is a systemic problem in the United States. It's not just the problem of one political faction or a deeply entrenched political elite. This is systemic to the United States. It's a grassroots problem.
With that big picture in mind, I wanted to ask you a few specificities of U.S. foreign policy, and I wanted to start with Venezuela. We had a few shows, in fact, maybe 5 or 6 shows on Venezuela since the U.S. regime kidnapped Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela. If you could give us a sense of what happened with that operation, because we haven't discussed in detail about what actually happened in Venezuela with that operation.
Well, I think what happened is that everybody was distracted by Delta Force flying in and kidnapping Maduro. That was the glamour. I mean, then we throw in the sonic weapon. People got distracted by that. The radars didn't work. People got distracted by that. And what they're not paying attention to is the fact that the CIA bought Venezuela. And then the real question is, how did that happen? How did the United States insinuate itself into Venezuelan society to the extent that we basically neutralized popular support for Maduro, and we hijacked the established elites, military and civil, to the extent now that we view the former Vice President Maduro, the president of Venezuela today, as an acceptable outcome because she works for us. We own her. We bought her. We bought everybody. That's what happened in Venezuela. And it's a manifestation of a decades-long pattern of behavior by the United States that repeats itself globally, and it should serve as a wake-up call to nations like Iran and Russia, to be honest. Anytime a nation engages in meaningful economic interaction with the United States, you've opened yourself up to exploitation, because the United States uses hybrid warfare that's linked to, cultural imagery, the Hollywood vision of what the world should look like, what it could look like if only you were like America, if only you believed in America, and people buy into that dream. One of the big facilitators of this is the internet, and the role that the internet plays in corrupting the minds of the young generation. Go back to the time of maybe this is a name that isn't familiar with you, but it should be Jared Cohen. Jared Cohen was a guy who back in in the early 2000s wrote a book about how he traveled the Middle East, and he saw in the youth of the Middle East a desire to be like America, that we were the same. And therefore, it was the duty and responsibility of the United States to be able to create connectivity through the internet so that the youth could collaborate. But this was really nothing more than an expression of soft power. Jared Cohen became a member of the State Department, began working with the Bush administration and later the Clinton administration to carry out what they call digital democracy, in injecting, infecting nations with the vision of America. And we did that in Syria, we did that in Egypt, we did that in Iran, and we do that everywhere. You know, in Syria, where every stone has been turned over because of conflict. Why does the internet work so well? Because it has to work well, so we can infect the mind of the Syrian people. In Iran today, 100,000 plus Starlink terminals have been sent to Iran. The Iranian government has only rounded up a few thousand of them. The ones that remain are still connected to a population that's being actively infected with hybrid warfare techniques to undermine the Iranian regime, to infect it from within, to make it susceptible to exploitation and manipulation. That's what happened in Venezuela, is that these elites were infected, and the United States took control. The Venezuelan model is the model that the Trump administration plans on using over and over again. I mean, look at the arrogance of it. In Iran, Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury, admits that he triggered the currency crisis that led to the demonstrations, and that it was planned, and that it was done in concert with other things. And then we see the unrest unfold based upon directions being sent into Iran through internet connectivity, and then it spreads out. This is the power the United States has. It's a power that goes beyond simply parking aircraft carriers off the coast of countries and threatening to bomb them. This is the power to destroy nations from within by corrupting the minds of the youth.
I want to pick your comment on CIA buying off Venezuelan elites. There are analysts who say that Delcy Rodriguez, the current acting president, Diosdado Cabello, the head of the national security in Venezuela, these are people who are committed to the Chavista, Madurismo ideology, government, etc. There are others who say that they have been bought off or coerced. What's your analysis on that?
Why is the United States opening up an embassy in Caracas?
Many are saying that that's pressurizing Venezuela into accepting a middle ground rather than buying off Rodriguez and others.
That's coping. Bottom line is you're allowing the United States to install a bastion of control. People know what an American embassy is. You should know what an American embassy is. All right? It's not there to help you. It's not there to be your friend. An American embassy is a control mechanism from which the United States, exerts power and influence and control, direct control. An American embassy allows the CIA now to have a formal operational base inside your country. So there's only one way to interpret the Venezuelan government allowing the United States to reopen its embassy, and that is that it has surrendered to the United States. Now, the CIA is smart enough to understand that you have to conceal certain things, you have to play certain games, etc. Especially early on in the stage of this, you don't want to make the reveal too quick. But no, I don't accept this notion of, I know what resistance looks like, and I know what capitulation looks like. And what I'm seeing in Venezuela isn't resistance, it's capitulation.
I wanted to move to Iran, given we are seeing the round of negotiations first in Muscat and now in Geneva. In parallel, we are having a tremendous buildup of U.S. military assets, including sending of aircrafts to the region. Iran, of course, is demonstrating its missiles and drones in the waters of Indian Ocean. are these negotiations real good faith negotiations, or are these another bluff that we saw last year to prepare for the right time to attack or stage another coup in Iran?
I think past performance is always an indicator of future outcomes. Um, the United States, first of all, is not interested in a negotiated settlement with Iran. The United States is interested in one thing and one thing only: regime change. President Trump's own rhetoric has backed that up. Ask yourself why Jared Kushner, who is one half of the negotiating team that met with the Iranians in Geneva, prior to going to Geneva, met with the Iranian diaspora in the United States to begin building the next government of Iran. If we were interested in a genuine diplomatic outcome, would we be working hard to find the replacement government as we negotiate? It tells you that this is a ploy. The United States has made it clear that it will not accept any Iranian enrichment. And yet the Iranian position is that they must be allowed to have enrichment as permitted under Article 4 of the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty. So what is there to negotiate? The Iranians fell into a trap where they have come up with an agreed upon construct that gives them hope. They're positive about this. Now they're going to go back for 2 weeks and engage in discussions on the next stage. During this 2 weeks, the United States will be building up its military power. But as long as diplomacy is open, see, the window of vulnerability for America is right now. If Iran were to exercise its Article 51 right of self-defense, preemptive self-defense, it's permitted under international law, an imminent threat manifesting itself, you're allowed to preempt it. The Caroline Doctrine, which is recognized under international law, it clearly states this. If Iran were to exercise preemptive self-defense and hit the United States now as it's deploying forces to the region, it would end any chance of an American decapitation strike. But now Iran is trapped in a negotiation. It is talking about a deal that will never manifest itself. And while they're talking, the United States is finalizing its deployment. And my guess is that on the eve of the next round of negotiations, the United States will pull the trigger and begin a massive campaign targeting Iran, the goal of which is regime change. This is what Donald Trump says his goal is. The Ali Khamenei must go. Must go. How many times does Donald Trump have to say that before people believe that that is indeed the policy of the United States?
And I wanted to ask you, what is your assessment of a realistic situation if there were to break out a war between the US and Iran?
Well, there are some in the United States that believe that Iran will hesitate at the moment of decision. That if there is an attack, rather than immediately carrying out a burning everything to the ground, because that's the only defense. That's the only deterrence Iran has. You say if there's a war, everything will be destroyed. Nothing will be left. We believe that Iran is going to hesitate on pulling that trigger, which gives us a window of opportunity to come in with massive application of force to neutralize as much of their ballistic missile launch capacity as possible, to prevent so that any Iranian response will be, watered down and manageable. And then to couple that with a renewal of unrest inside Iran, so that Iran is fighting a true front war. Their cities will be on fire. All those 70 to 80,000 Starlink terminals that haven't been discovered by the Iranian regime are linked to opposition groups who will come out of the woodwork now because they're being told this is the moment of decision. Iranian cities will be burning. Other military aircraft will be suppressing the Iranian ability to mobilize security forces. And we'll be looking at the collapse of the Iranian regime, the end of the Islamic Republic within a period of a few weeks. That's the Western vision of this. It is a very realistic vision. It's not an unrealistic vision. How many people thought that a single Delta Force raid could cause Venezuela to collapse? Not too many people. How many people predicted the fall of Bashar al-Assad the way he fell? Not too many people. And so there's a lot of people out there right now that say because because the Islamic Republic has existed for 47 years and has withstood American efforts to remove it, that it's simply not going to happen. I would say that the Iranian government is the greatest vulnerability right now because the United States, for the first time, is willing to apply the force necessary to achieve an outcome. There's no guarantee of success, though. The Iranians are very resilient, very resourceful, and my fear is that while we may succeed in burning down the Iranian cities, the Iranian people aren't necessarily supportive of the removal, and that they will support the government's brutal suppression of these outside powers. No mainstream Iranian citizen supports the Mujahideen al-Khalq. No mainstream Iranian citizen supports the monarchy. They don't support the Baluchistan Liberation Army. They don't support PJAK. They don't support any of these breakaway movements. They support a unified Iran. And so I believe that they will support the Iranian government's suppression. I also don't believe that, even if we kill Ali Khamenei, which we probably will, we don't respect the fact that the Islamic Republic is a constitutional republic and that there are lines of succession. There is an assembly of experts who already has picked the next supreme leader and has gone two down, that we will never eliminate the supreme leader because the supreme leader isn't an individual, it's a position, it's a status. It will be filled because that's what the Islamic Republic demands. We don't respect the fact that the parliament is elected by the Iranian people in a democratic fashion, so is the presidency, and that there are lines of succession that are constitutionally mandated. See, we tend to view this as removing an autocrat like a Nicolas Maduro type regime, like a Bashar al-Assad type regime. And we don't understand that the Islamic Republic is indeed a constitutional republic based upon democratic principles that have been accepted and embraced by the vast majority of the Iranian people. And therefore, the Islamic Republic will not collapse like a house of cards. And what we'll end up with is a region on fire, a global economy in collapse, and the United States trapped in a war it cannot win. That's what I believe the outcome will be.
And what is the degree of vulnerabilities of the U.S. military assets in the region, in the Persian Gulf and in Iraq, I suppose, and elsewhere?
Look, I was in the military for some time now. I'm not anymore, but I'm a veteran, and I operated at very high levels. Meaning, I was involved in, Army level decision making, national level decision making. The United States is not just going to sit there and let Iran punch it. All right. It doesn't mean that damage won't be done, but we will undertake measures designed to prevent Iran from doing the damage it wants to do. This is why Iran's only hope is a preemptive attack. If Iran allows the United States to bring the forces into the region we believe are necessary to carry out a major existential event inside Iran, that means we have a plan. Now, no plan survives initial contact with the enemy. The enemy always has a vote, and Iran will have a vote. But we have a plan in place designed to minimize American casualties. And I believe that plan is built upon our preemptive application of force and overwhelming capacity. Iran will never, if we attack Iran, it will be something that Iran has never experienced before in its life, even in June of 2025. The amount of violence that will be brought to bear, sustained violence, is going to be off the charts. And I think that's the American plan, is to put the Iranians off balance early on and then sustain this. We're bringing in military capability that is sustainable. If we are successful in suppressing Iran's ballistic missile retaliatory capacity, then we can sustain it. Iran, of course, also has a plan. I believe they are saying what can be done against us. And, if their plan's better than our plan, then they'll do harm against us. This is why I say the best option is just to avoid war altogether, because I don't think anybody's going to win this war. I think this war is just going to lead to devastation of Iran, devastation of the region, embarrassment for the United States, and devastation for the United States because, you know, our economy is fragile. One of the reasons why we're engaging in this very aggressive foreign policy is because of the fragility of the American economy, an economy that's linked to a failed rules-based international order system, and the necessity to replace that system with something new. But that something new requires, for instance, energy security on a global scale. And what a regional conflict with Iran, one outcome would be the devastation of global energy security by the basically the elimination of an entire, or energy rich region of the world's ability to produce that energy and deliver that energy to a market.
One final question on Iran before I come to US Russia. What is the driving force behind this US foreign policy doctrine towards Iran of government collapse instead of negotiated settlement? There is a thesis called as the Israel lobby, which says that it's mostly at the behest of Israel, which doesn't want Iran because of what it does in Palestine. Others say that it is also the strategic self-interest of U.S. empire in West Asia. What are your thoughts on what is the driving force behind U.S. foreign policy towards Iran?
Well, there can be no doubt that Israel plays a critical role in this, and that the uncompromising stance taken by Israel is being mirrored by the United States. Um, there's also, as you mentioned, the fact that the United States needs to mitigate against, global competitors. And that if we can't control Iran, then we view Iran, because Iran is a big nation with a lot of economic potential, especially in the energy world. If we can't control Iran, then we have to eliminate Iran as a competitor. Both these, though, are, these are policy problem sets that could be managed if we were looking for a solution. The thing that blocks the ability of the United States to rationally look for a solution is the Iranian takeover of the U.S. embassy. The world may have forgotten about that. We haven't. And we will never, ever, ever forgive. The other thing is the Iranian role in the bombing of the Marine barracks in Beirut. The world may have forgotten about that. We haven't. Now, people will say that's not fair, Scott. The United States shot down an Iranian airliner. We don't care. Do you think we care about Iranian lives? You think we shed tears over dead Iranian civilians? No. Hell, Madeleine Albright said 500,000 Iraqi children was a price we were willing to pay. We don't care about the lives of others. We care about our lives. And I'm not saying it's just. I'm telling you that America is infected with a mindset of hatred that is linked to these two events. And now we throw in a third event because we now have the new narrative that Iran is responsible for killing 600 to 800 Americans in South Iraq during the American occupation of Iraq. We ignore the fact that we had illegally invaded Iraq, illegally occupied Iraq, and all Iran was doing was supporting a native Shia resistance to an American occupier. No, you killed 600 to 800 American soldiers, and we will never forgive you for that. That's why we assassinated Qasem Soleimani, primarily because of his role in those actions. This is a disease that has infected America of Iranophobia. And until that disease is cured, it's going to be difficult for politicians to come up with rational policy solutions to these difficult policy problems. Because, as I said earlier, No American politician is going to win an election by saying America should be the equal of the world. No American politician is going to win an election saying America should forget about what happened with the U.S. Embassy, what happened with the Marine barracks, what happened in southern Iraq. It's a politically unsustainable position. And so these are major blocks, obstacles to any, what could be a potential, you know, political solution to a very difficult problem.
I wanted to end by discussing U.S.-Russia relation, given this is one area where we've seen the uh, most effective propaganda, Western propaganda, if we compare it to Palestine and elsewhere, where the internet has been able to burst many of the Western propaganda. Russia has, of course, been winning grounds on the field. All of that slowly but gradually led to the Alaska summit, which many saw that the U.S. was forced to accept Russia as an equal partner, regardless of whether it was true or not. Since then, things seem to have moved slowly. Some say backward, others say forward. I wonder what your readings are about the direction in which U.S.-Russia relationship is heading towards at this moment.
It's interesting how we're willing to give the United States, credit for being diplomatic with Russia when we recognize that the United States is incapable of being diplomatic anywhere else. A leopard doesn't change its spots. A tiger doesn't change its stripes. The United States is not a legitimate diplomatic partner to anybody. And this is the lesson that Russia's learning. Alaska wasn't about the United States conceding to Russia. The Russians have acknowledged that Alaska was about Russia giving major concessions to the United States and the belief that the United States was genuinely interested in a diplomatic outcome. It was Russia that, made some painful concessions. They haven't specified them, but there were some allusions to, in exchange for the Donbass being returned to Russia in its totality, Russia would freeze the line of contact in Kherson and Zaporizhia, which would be constitutionally very difficult for a Russian leader to sell. But the goal was they believed that the United States was serious about bringing an end to this conflict and bettering relations with Russia that could lead to positive economic outcomes. But as soon as the Alaska summit transpired, the United States immediately, instead of building on what Russia had done, these concessions Russia made, went and undermined these concessions by seeking to renegotiate them with the Europeans and with Zelensky. And the Russians went, "You're not serious. We made concessions to you. Your job was to embrace these concessions and then make them reality." But instead, the United States dragged it out, undermined it, and it showed to the Russians that the United States wasn't serious about anything. And then you combine that fact with the United States, it now turns out that the CIA is actively involved in empowering Ukraine's strikes into, Russia's strategic energy infrastructure, strikes against the Russian leadership, 91 drones directed by CIA provided intelligence to attack the residence of the Russian president while he was engaged in a communication with the United States president. I think Russia has awoken to the reality that the United States isn't serious about anything. And the last remaining obstacle for the United States, for Russia to overcome before they recognize that the United States can't be trusted at all, is they need to realize that this promise of, an economic light at the end of the tunnel is just an oncoming train, that the United States has no intention of engaging with Russia as partners, that the entire premise of American economic engagement with Russia since the collapse of the Soviet Union has been about American domination of the Russian market, American control of the Russian market, and basically injecting ourselves into Russian society in a manner in which we can then manipulate Russian society to bring down a form of government we don't support. We don't support a strong Russia, the strong Russia that Vladimir Putin has created. We view that as a competitor. And as I said earlier, we will brook no competitors. We want to collapse Vladimir Putin's regime. And so we're looking at the indirect approach. And again, I bring up the Venezuela thing, the role the internet plays in infecting the minds of Russians to create a fifth column, to sow doubt, to create alternative narratives, etc., is real. And you combine that with the potential of economic largesse, and you've now created a window of vulnerability for the kind of exploitation of the Russian political elites that happened in Venezuela, that is happening in Iran, where we promise them, we buy them off in exchange for their either remaining on the sideline or actively supporting anti-regime activity. So I think Russia, is awakening to this reality. But the fact is, the United States just isn't serious about a diplomatic outcome with Russia until the United States fundamentally divorces itself from past policies. For instance, it has been the policy of the United States for decades to strategically defeat Russia. Trump administration has not walked away from that policy. It simply disguises that ultimate policy objective, with the false promises of Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner.
And are Western weapons still going on into Ukraine over and above intelligence networks?
Yes, there's still Western weapons going into Ukraine. They're being destroyed. I mean, they're this notion that Russia is suffering thousands of dead per week is just an absurdity. Russia's dominating on the battlefield. They're waging a war of attrition that is one-sided in the scope and scale of losses, and ultimately Russia will achieve its goals and objectives through military means. I mean, this is the reality. It's a tragedy for Ukraine. It's a tragedy for Russia, but it's just a reality. I can't say it's a tragedy for Europe because I have a hard time sympathizing with Europe for what it's doing. This is a self-inflicted wound. You don't shoot yourself in the foot and then cry to me about, oh my, how my foot hurts. You're the one that shot it. So I don't view this as a tragedy for Europe, but it is a tragedy for the world, the way that Europe has allowed itself. Again, you're from a different part of the world. You may not hold Europe in the high esteem that I do, but my ancestors are European. And I look at history from a European prism, a European centric point of view, and this is a place that most Americans once viewed as being the home of modern culture, of intellectual development, scientific development, and to watch Europe just basically devolve into this massive chaos and anarchy and zero moral compass is it's very sad. But I don't have sympathy for the Europeans because they did this to themselves.
We'll leave it there, Scott. Thank you so much for your time, and good to see you again here.
All right, thanks a lot. Have a good day.
Hi, my name is Ayushman. I, along with Jyotisman, have started this platform. In the last 2 years, we have tried to build content for the left and progressive forces. We have interviewed economists, historians, political commentators, and activists so far. If you have liked our content so far and want us to build an archive for the left, I have two requests for you. Please do consider donating for the cause. Link is in the description below. Also, if you are not able to do so, don't feel sad. You can always like our videos and share our videos to your comrades. Finally, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.